Yo, let's go. Y'all ready for some deep dive into a massive work tonight, y'all? We have got. Let me know if you can hear me because I got a new mic. So hopefully you can hear me. Give me a thumbs up in chat if you can hear me. Tonight we are deep diving into the massive tome, um, Hamlet by William Shakespeare. Shakespeare's longest work. Y'all can hear me? Are we good? We good? Shouts out to my moms out there. Shouts out to all my homies. Shouts out to Jeff. Okay. Ellie. Jerry. Let's see. Natesky. Everybody in the chat. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you. All right, good. We good. We good. All right. Yeah, because I got this new mic and then I had to update. So sorry about that, y'all. A little tardy here. Tonight we are diving into the one of the most massive works in British literature, Shakespeare's largest and longest work. It's Hamlet, the 1600 play, year 1600. Shouts out to Rachel Wilson, based homeschool mom. Thank you for that awesome interview that we watched last night with Coteasy. Shouts out to Church of the Eternal Logos and Rachel. And also, great interview today with David Patrick Harry at Church of the Eternal Logos with Whitcoff, Brother Augustine. Got a lot out of that discussion that they did today. It was really, really amazing. So, yes, thank you for being here, everybody. So let's just dive right into it. I'm not sure where to start with this massive work. You probably have read this in, high school or college, grad school, etc. You may not have read it. If you haven't read it, introduction to the work, we're going to really dive into the text here. This should be as we always do here at the channel, we're going to dive into the words on the page, the text, right? Form plus content equals meaning. And we're going to discuss the plot of Hamlet, of course, sort of in a cursory manner, but we're really going to dive into what the play is saying, the worldview and the meaning that we can get from this play. This is widely considered Shakespeare's best and most famous work. Of course, Romeo and Juliet, which we've done here, is probably performed the most often, but Hamlet is also, in terms of theater, in terms of theatricality and acting in the acting world and drama, it is the dream role of every actor. Every actor, every professional actor, stage or screen, has two roles that they dream of playing. One is Hamlet, and the other is Iago of Othello, the villain in Othello. And this play precedes Othello, precedes Macbeth. And it's really such a massive play. I mean, it's let's see, Hamlet speaks about 1,500 lines of verse just himself. The play is at least twice as long as Macbeth. Of course, Macbeth was the first play that we covered here. Macbeth is my favorite Shakespeare play for so many reasons, but Hamlet deserves to be covered before we go any further in the channel, because it deals with a lot of the things that we've discussed here. It deals with geopolitics, family, religion, metaphysics, philosophy, assassination, possible incest, familial relationships, relationships of all kind, young people, old people, how to talk with people, how to have a conversation. It deals with theater. It deals with meta theater, puppet shows, the play within a play, simulacrum. There's so much that comes out of this play. And of course, we could take one soliloquy and probably, if you're taking a university class or a grad school class, you could take one soliloquy and study that for an entire semester. Seriously. It is extremely complex. It is all the best of Shakespeare. And we're going to also look at some critical analysis of the play. I thought I would show you some books that sort of inform my opinion of Hamlet over the years. Of course, this is just a thrift edition of Hamlet. Of course, we've discussed that, one of the differences between verse and prose is that when you're reading verse, right, lines of verse, poetry, poems, even if it's Elizabethan verse, like in play form, the lines are always the same. The line numbers are essentially the same, and the word order is always the same. So no matter what size book, no matter what year the book, aside from some editorial changes or cuts in the language, according to how language develops or archaism, etc., the play will remain the same. It always remains the same. And we've discussed how one of the rules, the sort of golden rule when you're staging, no matter what the production, you can always cut lines. You can cut as much as you want. You can adapt, but you can never add lines to Shakespeare. You ruin the integrity of the verse. We're reading that. We've got, of course, Harold Bloom's poem "Unlimited" from his not the Western canon. Is it the Western canon? Oh, Shakespeare and the Invention of the Human. This is a book length by itself, but it is an amazing critical analysis of Hamlet. I also read some Hugh Kenner and other scholars. And then I've got, this is a little hardback first edition that I picked up a long time ago with forward by Sir Ralph Richardson, the actor. And it's The World of Shakespeare, Animals and Monsters. And this is a great, of course, Shakespeare is so, the breadth of his verse is so, it's so heavy that, of course, he discusses every animal in his 37 plays. And then I've got Ted Hughes's Shakespeare and the Goddess of Complete Being. This is more of an esoteric analysis of Shakespeare. It's really good. I've got something that all actors, especially drama school actors, use, and that's just the Onion's Shakespeare glossary. This is always comes in handy when looking at terms and etymology, words and phrases. I've got this book. It's called "In the Beginning: The Story of the King James Bible and How It Changed a Nation, a Language, and a Culture" by Alistair McGrath. This is about the King James Bible, the development of it, and Shakespeare in parallel. It's a good book. Let's see. I read that in 2005. I've got this old paperback copy of, it's called "Shakespeare Alive: America's Foremost Theater Producer Brings Shakespeare's England to Life" by Joseph Papp, who is known for his role in public theater in New York. It's a good little paperback book. Of course, it's got the the central portrait here is a weird portrait of Shakespeare, if you can see that right there. And that's sort of the old accepted portrait of Shakespeare right there in the Elizabethan collar. Of course, now, if you followed the news or developments, we actually don't think of Shakespeare as looking like that anymore because a few years ago they discovered a portrait hidden in an attic. Sounds fictional and made up, but which is supposed to be a more realistic likeness of how Shakespeare was, especially in his youth. And he looks kind of like John Donne, the poet John Donne. Even though they were contemporaries, lived at the same time, he's in the same sort of attire, but the key difference is he's not bald. That donut cut later on, maybe his brain just outsized his skull, but he was not bald earlier in life, and actually looks a lot like he's like how he's portrayed in Shakespeare in Love with Joseph Fiennes, if you've seen that, the late 90s film. Okay. Shouts out to OK out there. Yeah, I think I know Shakespeare pretty well. It's funny because my sort of comprehension of Shakespeare is I don't feel like if I stop and think about it, like I don't actually feel like I know Shakespeare very well. I guess because because again, there's so much content, right? I mean, imagine just a novelist today writing 37 novels. I mean, unless you're one of the mega people like, Creeper Stephen King, like pumping out, shit novels every, two, three a year. Remember that Family Guy skit, right? They're in misery and he gets hit by the car and he like flips through the air and he's typing done. But that's just to pump up the number. We need to get those numbers down. But Shakespeare with 37 plays, and it's not prose verse, and the verse is so complex. I mean, we've covered Shakespeare, so we know. So it's really hard to imagine. And that is actually what feeds, I think, a lot of the people who are hesitant to believe that Shakespeare was one person. And again, just like that, I went through a brief phase where I thought, no, this wasn't a guy named Shakespeare. This was a ghostwriter, or it was, Francis Bacon or De Vere or whomever. But just, honestly, just going through the material and knowing the material for a couple decades and, really diving into it, I just don't see it. I don't see that it being I don't see that as being valid. Shakespeare is the guy who wrote it. And actually, today I was just thinking about, I was considering, what if the opposite is true, right? Hot take here, you guys. What if the opposite is true? What if some of the people who are claimed as the ghostwriters were actually Shakespeare? Does that make sense? For instance, some people, one of the claims is that the early tragedian, Elizabethan tragedian Thomas Kidd, who wrote the Spanish tragedy, we discussed him in the Duchess of Malfi analysis that we did of John Webster, Renaissance horror. Some claim that maybe Thomas Kidd wrote Shakespeare. Maybe he was one of the co-conspirators, so to speak. But my thought is, what if Shakespeare is the one who wrote Thomas Kidd? So for the reason I say that is because Thomas Kidd's Spanish tragedy in 1588, right, the year of the Spanish Armada, the year of the genesis of the English expansion, right, when they defeated the Spanish Armada, was the year that the Spanish tragedy was published, right? And around that time, there was a sort of proto version of Hamlet. It's referred to as the Hamlet, right? The Hamlet. And it may have even been performed. It was like a rudimentary version of Hamlet. And scholars sometimes claim that Shakespeare himself, among other sources, that he, stole the material. And by steal, I mean how how T.S. Eliot and Picasso say it, right? Great artists steal, bad artists or mediocre artists will borrow and try to make it their own. Shakespeare just lifted the source material, and that's fine, right? I mean, Romeo and Juliet is essentially Tristan and Isolde, etc. But there are also scholars who say that actually it was just an early Shakespeare. It was a young Shakespeare who wrote that version. And it was credited to Thomas Kidd. They knew each other. And then later he revised it himself and then published and performed his own Hamlet. Now, also the records show that Hamlet, Shakespeare himself, that he acted in the first productions of Hamlet, right, in 1600 and 1601. He played the ghost of Hamlet, the ghost of King Hamlet, and also most probably the player king in the play within a play. And so remember, Shakespeare was an actor. He was an actor of note. And at the time, right, with the King's Men, they were their patron was later became King James. First, they were Lord Chamberlain's men. John Webster, that we just read and analyzed, was also a member of that company. And before that, he would produce plays through the Blackfriars Theater, which was sort of a rival of the Globe, and they are mentioned. I also read today, I just came across something I'd forgotten, that the legend of Shakespeare dying, remember he died on his birthday, right? April 23rd, 1616. The legend is that he had been out drinking the night before with Ben Jonson, who became the first poet laureate of England, and another guy, Roger, I can't remember the other guy's name, but that they got so drunk, he got sick and he was probably already ill, and then he died the next morning on his birthday. So who knows if that's true? That's probably legend. Anyway, to get back on track here, one more thing. Everybody really should, I think everybody, especially if you have a library at home, everybody should have some sort of collected works of Shakespeare, right? As an English speaking, English speakers and English audience, and not to, be highbrow or anything, but just because it's one of those things that it's the complete works. I mean, look at this thing, right? Look at this. This is the complete works of Shakespeare. And it's not, look at the print. Look at the small print, right? This is massive. How could one dude write all this stuff? It's insane. I saw somebody say in a chat recently, how could a guy who couldn't spell his own name, come out with this stuff when you had all these Cambridge guys, like Marlowe and, then Webster, and they were educated, Francis Bacon, when they could write like this. Well, who knows? Who knows the mystery of genius, right? But there's no reason to say that it couldn't be true or that it wasn't true. We don't know Shakespeare's education. We know he went to grammar school. We don't know his education. He was certainly a genius, one of the geniuses of all time. And just tying that back to Hamlet, Hamlet is, I think I can safely say that Hamlet is by far the smartest, the most intelligent, the most well-read um, of any character in English speaking literature of any work. Um, Hamlet has no match. There's nobody that's any match for Hamlet in the play. There's no one that matches him. It was who was it that said, was it Beckett? Um, it was I forget who said it, but someone said that they imagined, just for fun, they imagined that Hamlet doesn't die at the end and that he grows up and moves to England and becomes Sir John Falstaff. And that's a funny little, a quirky little, you know, uh, uh, inside joke for English literature people. But there are a lot of parallels between Hamlet and Falstaff, but the differences are stark. I mean, Falstaff, if you know Falstaff, right, from the Henriade plays. Remember, we covered Henry V. Falstaff is, the big guy is full of wit and wisdom, and he, hangs out with the young Hal, the young Henry V. But he's no match for Hamlet in terms of his character is completely different, right? Shouts out to ADH there. Shouts out to TGF, the Green Feathers. Shouts out to everybody, Thomas Henderson, everybody watching right now. Appreciate y'all. And Hamlet, he's confronted in sort of, a series of battles of wits or attempted battles by various characters in the play, but nobody is any match for him. The only one who's a match for him really is the Gravedigger, which makes sense because the Gravedigger, of course, is, remember the thumbnail, right, with Arnold Schwarzenegger holding the skull of Yorick. Alas, poor Yorick. I knew him once. The Gravedigger is the paradox, right, is that the Gravedigger is the lowliest character in the play, but by being the lowest, he seems to be the highest, right? Kind of like the fool King Lear, when King Lear and the fool sort of switch roles. And he has the freedom to, he can speak freely with Hamlet, and his wit and his quips appeal to Hamlet. But nobody else is a match for him. And I've read this, my own thoughts about this play. I've read this play, I don't know, many times. I've read the play. I've done soliloquies and monologues and auditions from the play. I mean, if you were ever an actor, like at any level, the most amateur level, and you have to do a classical monologue and a modern monologue, or one from a tragedy, one from a comedy, everyone, of course, goes to Hamlet. Now, I never did the to be or not to be speech, but that is by far, hands down, the most famous speech in all of English literature. Everyone recognizes that speech. So what we need to do in this analysis is we need to discuss, first of all, what does that soliloquy, that particular soliloquy mean? Thank you very much, Rachel. Appreciate it. What does that particular soliloquy mean? What's he saying, right? To be or not to be, that is the question. What does that mean? We're going to go through that. We're going to go through some of the plot. We're going to discuss the relationships within the play. We're going to discuss the geopolitical elements in the play, because remember that the play is set in Denmark, right? There's something rotten in the state of Denmark. And within the play, invaded by an outside force, Norway, led by this guy, Fortin. We're going to discuss the shenanigans of the elite, because Hamlet is obviously of the elite class, and what's going on with Claudius, his uncle, and his mother, who are married. We're going to discuss the relationship between Hamlet and Ophelia, which is one of the craziest, most insane, literally insane, because she goes insane, relationships in English literature. We're going to discuss the friendships that Hamlet has, the play within the play within the play, actually. Play within a play within a play. And we're going to discuss Hamlet's, his worldview, his thoughts about life, the literal versus the figurative, metaphysics, his discussions about philosophy. I'll probably leave the philosophical discussion sort of at a surface level, because I feel like that is getting into territory that's not really my expertise. Of course, we're going to leave that to the professionals like Jay over at Jay's Analysis and others. I bet Witkoff could probably do a lot with those particular aspects of Hamlet. And what else? We're going to discuss Hamlet's views on religion and especially the occult elements in Hamlet. Now, the occult. Uh, what occult elements are in Hamlet, you may ask. I don't remember that at all. Even if you've read this once, you may go, what are you talking about? And then you go, oh, yeah, there's a ghost, right? He is informed of his mission in life by the ghost that appears at the beginning of the play. So maybe, like with a lot of other works, we'll see that there are certain Gnostic overtones within the play. And I'm just going to go ahead and say there are, of course. Now, the disclaimer or the statement I have about that is that I would say that what I think is that Shakespeare himself is not an occultist. He's not a hermeticist. I think that he is aware of these things. He's aware of religion. He's aware of the Luther Protestantism in Denmark. He's aware of obviously the Anglican system in England. He's aware of Roman Catholicism. Obviously, I mean, look at the breadth of his plays. He's also aware of more esoteric and pagan religions. Remember the Tempest with Caliban, and he is certainly aware of Judaism, right, with Shylock and the Merchant of Venice, the Hermetic tradition, and Rosicrucianism, alchemy. He lived at a time when this stuff was not only rife but popular, right? John Dee was a contemporary, and I think that in a way, sort of informs Hamlet's quest or his journey. We're going to see that it ends up being sort of a Gnostic journey, but actually ultimately um, against my wishes in the play. Hamlet ends up being I think it's pretty safe to say, I'm still not 100% on this. I got to make up my mind on it, but I think that that it's safe to say that Hamlet ends up just a pure nihilist. He hopes for annihilation at the culmination of the play. And the reason I say that I don't want that to happen is because, of course, you want him to find salvation, not apotheosis. You don't want him to find, some sort of Gnostic apotheosis or some sort of uh, Promethean transcendence, which I think it was W.H. Auden, maybe W.H. Auden, who said that he sees Hamlet as a Promethean figure. But we'll get to that. We'll see what that means. So why don't we go ahead and start with, let's see here. I'm going to start with, it's got a pile of books over here. All right, why don't we start with just the text of Hamlet. So thank you again. Shouts out to everybody out there. Oh, what happened here? Let's see. Something just came through. That is, oh, sweet. I'll read this as I get it. Thank you so much from, let's see, that's $5.01 donation. Thank you from Schultz Deals. Appreciate you out there. Appreciate you. Yeah, you guys see the mods and see the links that they provided. And please don't hesitate to drop a super chat via if you drop it via Cash App, of course, I can read your message. I can get your message. Or PayPal or Venmo. Appreciate y'all out there. So let's get started here. I'm just going to look at my basic notes in the front of this version of Hamlet right here. And this is just from rereading it today. So again, this stuff is endlessly fruitful. I've read Hamlet so many times, and it's like I feel like I know the play and the role, but you can come at it through so many different angles, especially like a purely theatrical angle. Hamlet, of course, is the supreme actor, right? He's an artist. He is highly interested in art and in theater. I mean, he directs the plays within the plays. So you could come at it from that point of view. You could come at it from a sort of proto-religious point of view, trying to determine what it is in this world within Hamlet. You could come at it from just a surface level. And of course, reading it, I always go back to the surface or the literal level in the play because that's valid. And all these levels are valid, right? We're not making things up. We're using the text to support our opinions about it. So just a couple of things that I wrote down here just at the start. let's see. Let's see. Hamlet. Let's see. Hamlet. Okay, so first of all, Hamlet is he's 20 years old at the start of the play. A lot of productions. We're not going to talk so much about theatrical or movie versions of this because it would take too much. But one version that just immediately comes to mind is the Kenneth Branagh version, and I love Ken Branagh. I love his work. He popularized Shakespeare. He made it really accessible to me. But oh, sweet. Thank you so much, Devin Altman, for $10. Appreciate you out there, Devin Altman. Appreciate you. Thank you for the $10 donation. But a lot of productions get it wrong. And that the most arresting thing about the Branagh version is that, Kenneth Branagh is like 36 when he made the film, and, Hamlet is 20. And that would seem to be something that like wouldn't matter, in terms of the production. Except for the fact that Hamlet is like, he's like forever 20. He's a young guy. Part of his character is that he's so young and zealous, and he's obviously a college student. He goes to the University of Wittenberg. But in Act 5, he's when he's talking to the gravedigger the math in it is that it's been like 30 years since Yorick died. And so that would make Hamlet, I think that would maybe 20 years. So that would make Hamlet 30. So in other words, like he like preternaturally ages in Act 5. And it sort of transcends the bounds of reality, if that makes sense. We're going to get to that and how he changes in Act 5. Remember, all Shakespearean plays, I think all Elizabethan plays have 5 acts, divided into 5 acts. And the action usually takes place like sort of in a 3-act process, but the plays are divided by scholars into 5 acts. So, he's a 20-year-old student at the University of Wittenberg, where Martin Luther went, of course. Let's see. The play, we mentioned that the play is the longest Shakespearean play. It's twice as long as Macbeth. It's about 4,000 lines of verse. Let's see. Yeah, he speaks about 1,500 lines himself. There's a wide cast of characters in this play, and it's not confusing really at all. You get to know all the characters are so alive. And if there's also one thing that Shakespeare is an adept at, it is voicing female characters, which is one thing that is an impediment to many of the great playwrights. They can't write in a female voice. Of course, like Tennessee Williams, the modern playwright Tennessee Williams, writes much better female characters, female voices than he does male. So that's sort of an inversion. But Shakespeare he gets it. He covers the entire range of the human condition. Hamlet, let's see. Hamlet, I wrote, Hamlet represents the limits of human consciousness, and he confronts them. That's part of what he's doing in this, is that he's confronting his reality. And he is, what is it? Jim Morrison says, let's just say we were testing the bounds of reality, right? Well, that's what Hamlet does. He tests the bounds of reality. And in fact, he transgresses the bounds of reality, because Hamlet, it's just so really realized it on this most recent reading. Hamlet is the protagonist in the play. He's the tragic hero. He's the title character, but he is not a hero. In fact, he's pretty bad. I think at least 8 people end up losing their life in this play. I don't remember if that's counting Hamlet or not. But he pushes Ophelia, his girlfriend, to suicide. He kills her dad. He murders her dad. He knows that he's back there behind the curtain, but he kills him. He has no remorse about it. In fact, he has lines like, come back later, we'll move the meat. But one of the philosophical moral points in the play is, as Hamlet voices it, he voices all of his thoughts in the play. One of the points is the fact that he says that Fortinbras, the king of Norway, is during the action of the play, Fortinbras, the king of Norway, is crossing over Denmark to get to Poland, and the Hamlets, or the state of Denmark, has let him do that. And this follows a long series of battles and wars that precede the play, where King Hamlet, Hamlet's dad, defeated Fortinbras's dad. So Denmark fought against Norway, and Hamlet's dad beat them. But then Fortinbras crosses over Denmark to get to Poland, and Hamlet calls it, that says they're coming over just to like take this little patch of dirt, right? This little nothing place, and all these people are going to die. All these soldiers are going to die, and Hamlet is like, he's conscious of the fact that like he's okay with approving that's going to happen, but he can't come to terms with avenging his father by killing his uncle Claudius. So we got to figure out like what is the thing that makes him stop there. He's willing to take life, but he like his indecisiveness makes him stop and stall for the whole play. People will, I think, mistakenly say that his tragic flaw is his indecision, but I would disagree with that. In fact, I don't know if I can come up with a tragic flaw for Hamlet. I think it's much more nuanced and complex than that. Of course, in terms of just before we keep going, in terms of Hamlet's legacy, right? There's such a body of work that has incorporated and absorbed the story of Hamlet that like there's so much that we forget that Hamlet is the origin. Now, some scholars would argue that Hamlet itself is an Oedipal play, and we just covered Oedipus Rex. Go see my Oedipus Rex series of analyses. But I would argue against that. I would say that it's not Oedipal. There are elements that seem Oedipal. Freud himself said explicitly that Hamlet was an Oedipal play, right, in the Oedipal complex, because, of course, the father dying and then the obsession with the mother. But I think that's another cope. I don't think that that's valid. Simple, not really simple or simplistic, but really the complex reason being that it supersedes Oedipus Rex. Hamlet supersedes, it transcends all these other works of literature. I mean, it's just too big. It just encompasses them all. It's just much more and much deeper and much more complex. And I don't mean to sound like I have this, Hamlet, reverence for Hamlet, but it truly does sort of command that when you're reading it. It's an incredibly difficult and complex play, but it's also fun. It's the language of this play. This is why I like Shakespeare, because if you're out there and you don't like Shakespeare, or you hate Shakespeare, or he puts you off, I can totally understand that. What I would say to that is that the thought process in there probably is that you may not have ever, maybe you never had anybody that gave you the proper introduction to Shakespeare. I'm not pretending to do that. Or that informed you as to what it is. And the first thing I would say again is that Shakespeare is not Old English. It's not like old fashioned, out of use, archaic language. There is that in there. You have to think of Shakespeare as it's contemporary English. He gave us so many of these words and phrases, and he says them, the whole point of poetry, right? Coleridge, the best words in the best order. He synthesizes language into its purest form so that the scenes and the words that are used in the text can never be used in a better or more effective way in that situation. It can't happen, right? What is this quintessence of dust, he says, right? Well, that's what Shakespeare is. It's the quintessence of the beautiful language of the things that can't be said any better or any more effectively. I'm sorry, I'm babbling on here, you guys. Let me get to this. I'm just going to finish a few notes. Hamlet, of course, is the title character. He's about 20 years old. He's a university student. He's back in Denmark at home at the palace at the castle of Elsinore, because his mother, named Gertrude, is marrying, and this occurs right away in the play, is marrying Claudius. Claudius is the present king of Denmark, and Claudius is also described as the younger brother of the recently deceased King Hamlet. So Hamlet, the title character, is actually Hamlet Jr., right? They have a weird relationship. Hamlet has an adversarial relationship with them, especially with Claudius, right from the get-go, because his father has just died, and now this guy comes in, takes the throne, and also takes his mother as his wife. So he repeatedly refers to incest, like as if the brother-in-law married the sister-in-law, and that's like incestuous. But actually, we're going to look at it and see, is he being literal? Is that actually possible? And who's to say that King Hamlet is actually Hamlet's biological dad? Maybe Claudius is actually his dad. And that might be part of the deep reason deep in his psyche that he refuses to kill Claudius, because he knows that. Also with the occult, the esoteric, which is plainly in the text, a lot of people gloss over this, which is strange because the language is right in the face, that the ghost of Hamlet that appears at the beginning of the play. Hamlet goes in, he sees his now stepdad or whatever, his uncle and his mom. They say, hey, we're getting married, stick around or whatever. And he says, like, I'm going to go off. Hamlet goes and meets with his best friend Horatio and a couple of guards. The guards say, oh, we were out on watch and we saw this ghost and it was scary, but we didn't really see him, but we sort of saw him. And then Horatio sort of sees him, and then Horatio says, like, Hamlet, come on. You need to see this. I think it's your dad, the ghost of your dad. And Hamlet right away starts using language of the pure John D, King James 1577 or whatever the text was, demonology, purely occult language, saying, oh, when he goes and sees the ghost, he calls on the ghost, he calls him out, he says, come forth, he calls him by name, he does all those things, he says, speak to me, he invites him, right? And he says, thou art like my father, right? But he doesn't say that it is his father. And the ghost himself says, I'm inhabiting your father, and I've come from hell. And he says that the ghost tells him he's come from hell to deliver this message to him, like an oracle. And then when that's happened, then he can go back into the other world, which we assume he's going back in hell, because he talks of his deeds and how, he has to be purified of his deeds in fire because he was so bad in life. And what does he tell Hamlet? He tells him, yo, your dad was murdered. In fact, the way it happened was, he says he was lying in the orchard, and he was, having a nap or whatever. And Claudius came along and poured some poison in his ear. And it made him go stiffen up like lead, and he died right away. He died without last rites. He was murdered. It was a, most pernicious, most ignominious murder. And of course, we don't know whether this is the truth or not. I've always assumed, take this just take him at his word. Of course, this is what happened. And Hamlet spends the rest of the play considering and pondering revenge and, what to do about his uncle who usurped the throne. But he also, there's a lot of language about, just like in the Duchess of Malfi, that refers to the incestuous relationship and how he took his mother's bed. And it's weird that he's the son and he was so obsessed with this. It's weird. And also the fact that, who's to say that this demon, he calls him a demon. And there's continuous mention of devils in the play. And who's to say that this isn't a devil and that he's not lying to Hamlet? In the stream, was it last night about City of God? It was either in that one or the one before that Jay did. And I think it was last night. And Jay over at Jay's Analysis was talking about how throughout the Bible, right, whenever anyone is possessed, every time that they're possessed, they try to commit suicide, right? It continuously happens. So the demons are trying to destroy you, destroy this, the sanctity of human life. And they're trying to, subvert and invert creation. And that's interesting apply in how it's applied in its application to Hamlet, because many people will focus on Hamlet's sort of quasi suicidal soliloquies throughout the play. Now, I disagree that his soliloquies are suicidal. I don't think that he is suicidal. I don't think that he intends that at all. But it is an interesting notion, because what's his goal? What's his aim? What is he doing throughout this? We know what his literal mission is. He's thinking like, should I get rid of this guy? And how can I bear this like affront to my family's name and to my name? And keep on going. Well, look at the solution. Look at the end of the play, right? Everybody dies in the end of the play. Pretty much everybody. Horatio, of course, doesn't die, but he tries to die. Hamlet, by the way, does not represent us, the reader or the audience. He is not us. We identify with him in certain ways. We have to, because of the nature of the play. But he's like beyond us in many ways. I don't want to say in terms of his like just his intelligence. He's obviously intelligent. I mean, just his intelligence alone sort of puts him above all the other characters in the play, obviously, above everyone. But that's not why we're not him. We're not Hamlet because we're actually Horatio. Horatio is like sort of a chorus in the play, which is interesting because there's a scene between Hamlet and Ophelia where Hamlet is like describing how he says, the play's the thing wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king, right? So he stages this play called The Mousetrap, and then a play within the play. And he does that because he intends to get Claudius and Gertrude there to watch the play. And when the events in the play happen, he says, I'll be able to gauge by their reactions whether they are like guilty or not, and whether they actually did kill my dad, right? King Hamlet. But when he tells that to Ophelia, Ophelia says, what does she say? Something like, you're not the hero, you play the chorus, which is an insult to Hamlet, of course, but he comes back with a deeper insult. He ends up annihilating her. And I think that is, it's really weird why he treats her the way he does. That's another thing that like, it's really hard to get your head around why he treats her this way. On the other hand, like her dad and her brother, Polonius and Laertes, tell her, even in Act 1, that like, don't trust this dude. He's like psycho, is essentially what they're saying. And I don't use the word psycho I'm not just like, it's not coming out of the blue, right? I use that because I think Hamlet is also an example of this thing that we've discussed many times here, and that we've seen others discuss in other streams, which is this like sort of psychopathic system of the elites, and they're training the young into how they run the empire, right? Which is to say, you're young, you're born, you're sent off to boarding school at 5, you don't come back till you're older. The maternal instinct or the soft feelings are tempered and bred out of you, so that you sort of become this hard, unfeeling in a way psychopath, so that when you're the governor of Shanghai, or you're running an oil corporation, you are not prone to feeling for the lesser people way down the pyramid, right? If that makes sense. You guys know what I'm talking about. But Hamlet is certainly like, he's in that. There's no indication that like he ever, like loved his dad or spent time with him. In fact, we can assume that like actually poor Yorick, the guy whose skull that he holds at the end, was actually like his sort of mother father figure. He spent way more time with Yorick, right? One of the reasons why that you have that iconic image of Hamlet holding the skull is because he's essentially like, he's looking at himself, right? He's pondering death, and also he's sort of looking into a mirror himself. The idea of mirrors, reflection, is huge in this play. Of course, that always is a kind of archetypal image and device, especially in Renaissance plays, Renaissance theater. And it continues to be, right? But in this one, it's particularly effective because of at one point, Hamlet decides to leave Elsinore, and he decides to go back to school with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, who, by the way, have their own side play by Tom Stoppard, right? Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, starring Tim Roth and Gary Oldman. And they are these sort of like weird, like Gemini twin characters in this play. They are Hamlet's friends, but he doesn't trust them, rightly so. They're used against him. And then they are condemned to be executed. Hamlet sort of leaves them off in England to be executed there. But he goes on this sea voyage with them away. And then when he returns, it's like he's been regenerated, reborn, almost like, baptized into something new from the sea, because Act 5 is completely different than the rest of the play. It's sort of all of the things in Acts 1 through 4 are realized in Act 5. We can talk about the violence in the play. Okay, so what happens is Polonius is sort of like, he's not like a boomer character. He's just kind of like, he speaks in platitudes. He's kind of funny but also annoying, but he speaks in platitudes. Neither a borrower nor a lender be. To thine own self be true, which is an interesting concept in the context of this play. To thine own self be true. Hamlet is, can we call him like the quintessential egoist? Everything he does and says is like about himself essentially and his place in the world, right? That doesn't really make him a narcissist, but he's certainly concerned with like his own personal ego quest, and I don't mean that like in a Freudian way. We're going to avoid, of course, all that mess. Shouts out to Crispy said, "All right, I'm banned." Oh, I'm sorry, Crispy. Are you banned? Nah, you're here, buddy. Kristen said she's already on the watch list and they're watching All Over You by association. Shouts out to Kristen at Slowboy Whiteboard. If you're watching this, especially later, please go to Slowboy Whiteboard at youtube.com. That's our homegirl, Kristen. She's got the most amazing channel. She's always posting and reposting based content. I love her content. It's endlessly watchable. And I think it would be cool to see the reactions to some people who are new to a lot of that material, because I think it would be like, it's like red pill moment, especially like the Akinos and stuff from recently. But I love it because like her material is pretty like unpredictable in terms of what's she going to post next. I get excited for it. So keep on going, Kristen. We love you and appreciate you. Let's see, where was I? So Hamlet, he goes off, then he comes back. Polonius does have a funny moment, which is sort of a meta ironic moment, because Hamlet specifically, like, he's directing the play within the play, and I think it's Priam has these long speeches, and Hamlet directs him, like, how to speak and how to act, and the audience is sitting there watching this, and then Polonius voices what the audience is thinking, which is, this is too long. And of course, Hamlet shuts him down right away. Nobody can match Hamlet for wit. He is the best insult artist. And of course, with Ophelia, he goes really far, and it's really disturbing. But anyway, when he's talking to his mother later on, Polonius is spying on him from behind a curtain. He kills him. And then fast forward through a series of sort of stratagems put forth by Claudius to eliminate Hamlet via Laertes, who is mad because Hamlet has driven his sister to suicide and killed his dad. Laertes goes to the grave of his sister Ophelia, and he famously dives into the grave. Anyway, at the end of the play, there's a big scene, like a banquet scene with a game, like sort of they're fencing, and there's a poison pearl. Gertrude accidentally drinks it. The rapier, I think it's a rapier, the sword, right? The sword and rapier that Laertes is using in the duel with Hamlet has been poisoned. He gets points he scores points on Hamlet. He cuts him. And of course, Hamlet knows he is poisoned. He's going to die, but he kills Laertes. He kills Claudius. Who else dies? Osric dies, a sort of side character. Ophelia's dead. And essentially in the end, like a bunch of people died. It's sort of a bloodbath. And then Horatio gives the famous sort of brief eulogy, right? Good night, sweet prince. Choirs of angels singing to thy rest. And then he's sort of carried. And then Fortinbras, the king of Norway, enters, right? Sort of a deus ex machina, and says, we're going to bury this guy with full honors, even though Hamlet wasn't a soldier. And then that's the end of the play. Well, there's a lot more to it than that, of course. I mean, those are just the events. But the question is, like, does Hamlet experience an apotheosis in this? Does he wish for oblivion? Does he wish for complete nothingness? And I suppose now after 50 minutes, let's dive into some of the text of the play, you guys. Bear with me for a sec. And just going to go over some of the language at the beginning. Let's see. So in Act 1, Scene 1, Marcellus, one of the guards, he says, with us to watch the minutes of this night, that if again this apparition come, he may approve our eyes and speak to it. The word eyes is used throughout the play as a foreshadowing device. It's actually the same as the hand in The Duchess of Malfi by John Webster, and the eyes in Oedipus Rex, and the ears in Hamlet. There's continuous reference to hearing and ears because, of course, that's the method by which King Hamlet is killed. In a few minutes after that, one of the guys says, when yon same star that's westward from the pole had made his course to illuminate, confirm, right? That part of heaven where now it burns, Marcellus and myself, the bell then beating one. The bell is obviously the death knell, right? Ask not for him, the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. Horatio comes in and he says, what art thou that usurpst this time of night? He's talking directly to this specter, this ghost, right? Horatio says, stay, speak, I charge thee, speak. Marcellus, 'tis gone and will not answer. How now, Horatio? You tremble and look pale. Is not this something more than fantasy? What think you on't? Horatio says, before my God, I might not this believe without the sensible and true avouch of mine own eyes. In other words, he wouldn't believe it if he hadn't had this moment of empirical data, right? He's seen the specter. Now the question is, like, does he really see the specter? Does he see the ghost? What's the deal with this scene? I think that he does, but the question is, why are they all seeing this demon ghost, and who is there for Hamlet? And he doesn't say anything until Hamlet comes along, and I think that ties into the shenanigans of the elite in this play, because later on Hamlet will say that Claudius himself has usurped the throne via witchcraft and essentially devil worship, right? He has been doing rituals. We can imagine Claudius doing rituals and then committing this ritual murder of the king, right, in order to usurp the throne and then commit these incestus acts, right? Horatio says, in what particular thought to work I know not, but in the gross and scope of my opinion, this bodes some strange eruption to our state. The eruption to the state in Act 1, Scene 1, the eruption to the state indicates that, first of all, it's a pun in a number of ways. First of all, it indicates that the ghost, the specter, arose to them from beneath. He came from beneath. He didn't appear out of the air. He wasn't a ghost of the air. He wasn't a familiar spirit like in The Duchess of Malfi. He arose from beneath, from hell, right? Also, the eruption indicates that there is a sort of tectonic shift that's going to happen in the power structure within this world, right? And, of course, at the end of the play, Hamlet essentially walks into annihilation of the entire state structure. All the power people are killed, and it's just handed right over to Fortinbras, to a foreign power, right? It's a geopolitical strategy. He never meets Fortinbras in person, but they're sort of equals. But Fortinbras is more of a, like, he's just, Harold Bloom refers to him as a head basher, right? He's just sort of a Viking character throwback, even though it's set in the medieval era. He's sort of he's like an old Dane, or not a Dane, right? He would be Norwegian. So what would he be? Not a Geet. Somebody, I don't remember what he would be. Who was in Norway? Not the Geats. Obviously not the Angles, not the Saxons. Anyways, I'm getting lost. Okay, somebody correct me in chat. Let's see. Then, Horatio appears. He gives his long exposition. He says, okay, yeah. So he gives an exposition on what has happened prior to the events of the play. He says, in which our valiant Hamlet, for so this side of our known world esteemed him, the old Hamlet, King Hamlet, did slay this Fortinbras, who by a sealed compact well ratified by law and heraldry did forfeit with his life all those his lands which he stood seized of to the conqueror, against the which a moiety competent had he been vanquished as by the same covenant and carriage of the article designed, his fell to Hamlet. Now, sir, young Fortinbras of unimproved metal, hot and full, hath in the skirts of Norway here and there sharked up a list of lawless resolutes. In other words, he is coming back to take lands that were taken from him in this sort of ancestral infighting, right? Let's see, the mention of omens, fates, portentous, the mind's eye. Okay, then the ghost comes back, and Horatio says, "Stay, illusion. If thou hast any sound or use of voice, speak to me. If there be any good thing to be done that may to thee do ease and grace to me, speak to me. If thou art privy to thy country's fate, which happily foreknowing may speak. Or if thou hast aborted in thy life extorted treasure in the womb of earth, for which they say, you spirits oft walk in death, speak of it, stay and speak." And then the ghost goes away, the specter, the demon goes away. In other words, he's doing that old thing of conjuring and charging this demon to speak, right? He says, let's see, let's skip on to enter King and Gertrude. I'm going to sort of gloss over some of these speeches. He says, he says, though yet of Hamlet, our dear brother's death, the memory be green, and that it us befitted to bear our hearts in grief and our whole kingdom to be contracted in one brow of woe. The brow of woe is an interesting image, because the brow of woe is obviously the sullen brow, because there's been a recent death. And Hamlet, that describes Hamlet's appearance. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, don't fall asleep, y'all. Don't fall asleep, Allie. No, you can go to sleep. It's many hours ahead there, you guys. Stick with me here. I'll try to stop babbling and get to some points here. The brow of woe is also the idea of the crown itself, right? It's the sullen crown that sits as a detestable image in front of Hamlet. And even though Claudius tells Hamlet that he's next in line for the throne, it doesn't assuage his not his guilt, but his I guess his enmity, right? He says, our state to be disjoint and out of frame. Now that will be repeated later when Hamlet says the time is out of joint. Something is rotten, right, in the state of Denmark. Let's see. They introduce Hamlet and they say, but now my cousin Hamlet and my son, and Hamlet, his first line here is a little more than kin and less than kind, right? We've all heard that. We've all heard that line. What does he mean by that? A little more than kin and less than kind, right? Well, he's a little more than kin. Okay, so literally, Claudius is a little more than kin because he's his dad's brother, right? He's a little less than kind because he thinks that, he has a bad feeling right now about Claudius and the murder of his father. But kin and kind, he's also thinking like he's less than kind. Maybe he's more than kin because is Claudius Hamlet's father? Is he his actual father? Is he less than kind because he's like him, but he's unlike him? Claudia says, how is it that the clouds still hang on you? And Hamlet says, not so, my lord. I am too much in the sun. Illuminate confirm. All that lives must die, passing through nature to eternity. Sort of a, I don't know, not nihilistic, but it's sort of a matter of fact statement about the nature of life and how he's over his dad's death because, everybody's got to die. Let's see. Hamlet says, I, madam, it is common. Queen, his mother says, if it be, why seems it so particular with thee? And Hamlet says, seems, madam? Nay, it is. I know not seems. 'Tis not alone my inky cloak, good mother, nor customary suits of solemn black, nor windy suspiration of forced breath, no, nor the fruitful river in the eye, nor the dejected behavior of the visage, together with all the forms, moods, shapes of grief that can denote me fully. In other words, I'm more than just like the sum of my parts, right? Even though I look this way, please try to understand what I'm thinking and how I'm feeling. But I have that within which passeth show, these but the trappings and the suits of woe. Let's see. Let's move on. There's an interesting line here, and that is Claudius in his attempt to talk to his, now stepson Hamlet. He says, for your intent in going back to school in Wittenberg, it is most retrograde. Interesting, he uses the word retrograde here, right? An astrological word to describe Hamlet's return to university and to the state where they all are, right? Their home, sort of home planet. To our desire, and we beseech you, bend you to remain here in the cheer and comfort of our eye, our chiefest courtier, cousin, and our son. Hamlet says, thaw and resolve itself into a dew, or that everlasting had not fixed his cannon against self-slaughter. Here's where people start to think that Hamlet is suicidal. Because he's saying, oh, if things could, if only I could, off myself, and then, I wouldn't have to deal with any of this. But unfortunately, the everlasting, right, God has made it so that we can't like turn the cannon against ourselves for self-slaughter. But my interpretation of this is like sort of more of a Gnostic statement, right? He's saying, or that the everlasting, capital E, everlasting, had not fixed his cannon against self-slaughter. In other words, if only like I wasn't trapped in this sort of system and I could transcend to a higher level. He says, 'tis an unweeded garden that grows to seed things rank and gross in nature possess it merely. It's an Edenic image. That it should come to this, but 2 months dead, nay, not so much, not to so excellent a king that was to this Hyperion to a satyr. So loving to my mother that he might not beteem the winds of heaven, visit her face too roughly. Frailty, thy name is woman, right? Because he says, oh, most wicked speed to post with such dexterity to incestuous sheets. It is not, nor it cannot come to good, but break my heart, for I must hold my tongue. Incestuous sheets, describing his mother. Now, we get the literal interpretation of that, right? Again, because of, she's a widow. It's been 2 months, and now she's already remarried, and she remarries her brother-in-law. But I think that there's something more to that. He says, let's see, Horatio comes and says, I saw this ghost, right? And he says, do you see her? Do you ever think of your dad? He says, Hamlet says, in my mind's eye, Horatio. Horatio says, I saw him once. He was a goodly king. Horatio is Hamlet's best friend, and he saw his dad one time, right? That, again, that sort of vindicates what I was saying about like the elite system, the psychopathic system, right? And how Hamlet's dad is probably his father and mother figure is sort of Yorick, right? Hamlet says, he was a man, take him for all in all. I shall not look upon his like again, which is often used as a sort of a eulogy, right? Or even an epitaph for the dead. But that's all he can say about him, right? I knew your father. These hands are not more like. Okay, let's see. Let's get to the idea of the will. Hamlet says, "My father's spirit in arms, all is not well. I doubt some," he says, "I doubt some foul play," which actually, scholars will take that to mean that like he suspects foul play, he has doubts. But it's an interesting turn of phrase, right? Right? Would the night were come, till then sit still my soul. Foul deeds will rise, though all the earth o'erwhelm them to men's eyes, which is like a really Macbethian thing to say, right? He's going to live by night and wait for the yawning peal of night. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, next scene is Laertes um, and Polonius discussing Hamlet, and they're basically they tell Ophelia, "Look, man, don't mess with this guy. Like, he's one of these elite guys, and he likes you now, but he's just using you for he's a young man, and you're young." And he just like he protests his love to you, but actually he's probably not going to follow through because as soon as he ascends the throne, they say his will is not his own. Basically, his will is the will of the state, right? Or the head of the royal family, which is interesting and obviously still true. We see this today, right? Um, However, it's strange because they are adamant, right? And Ophelia's like, no, 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 no. I love him. I really like. He talks to me, and I love him. The question is, are they vindicated later in the play because of how Hamlet acts to Ophelia, or do they cause him to act like that? Right? Shouts out to Rat. He says, "Fact check is barely the best answer." Appreciate you, Ratsky. Rat Splatigan. Shouts out to Based Rat Splatigan, our longtime homeboy. Love you, homie. Let's see. Hamlet. Hamlet goes on to talk about how that night, the wedding reception, Claudius is making a fool of himself. He's getting drunk in a sort of bacchanal. Of course, he's also with Gertrude. So one thing you can say for Claudius and Gertrude in this play is they may have committed murder. Who knows if they were in league with each other? Who knows if they did it at all? Right? Who knows the validity of the Hamlet's suspicions, right? Or rather, the demon, what the demon tells him. But you can certainly say that one thing that Claudius and Gertrude have going for them is they certainly have a happy marriage. They're together, like in every scene. They're like a team. They're one. They everything they do is united, and they certainly seem to be in love. And they're having a good time on their wedding night. Of course, it's probably like an eyes wide, ritual going on. And in fact, if you watch the Branagh version of Hamlet from '96, which by the way is a fun movie, what I was saying earlier about Kenneth Branagh is my criticism of him is that he kind of does what a lot of amateur productions of Shakespeare will do, in that when he sometimes when the characters are speaking, it's like they're just reciting lines. I don't believe it in their eyes. That's probably like too nuanced of a criticism, but the whole point of his '96 movie was to do the entire uncut, unedited Shakespeare Hamlet, which had never been done in film. Obviously, it's 4 hours. But plot twist: Hamlet murdered his dad. Maybe he did. Right? I mean, he certainly he comes off as totally psycho in this play, and yes, he's in. My hot take criticism of Hamlet, the supreme intelligent character, is that, well, he can't be that intelligent because he's a nihilist, right? He doesn't he talks about the afterlife, he talks about God, but he doesn't seem to like worship, pray, believe in God, and he doesn't look for salvation or it's not that he doesn't look for peace. And he's an actor for the state, and he's literally an actor, which sort of ties into the degeneracy within the play. But he's also, I mean, he's a psycho, right? He scares people in the play, and he's certainly dangerous. He scares his mother completely. Like when he confronts her in her bedroom, he confronts her and then that's when he kills Polonius, of course. So he violates, their bedroom by murdering this guy, even though the guy is there to spy on him. And it's interesting. I think that yeah, okay says I'm seeing Hamlet in a whole new light. I think that brings to mind one aspect of this play, which I've always, I've always like. It's interesting to see the number of interpretations in terms of like productions of this play. I've seen many productions of Hamlet. I'm not bragging, folks, but yeah, I've seen many productions over the years, ranging from like total amateur to professional to like West End, England, and some really great touring productions. And one thing that I would say is that probably the best version of the play I saw was done by Birmingham Rep, which is a great theater company in England. I saw them in Belfast, and I really liked that production because it was the only production I saw where Hamlet's madness is genuine. In other words, like one of the aspects of the classical or the Renaissance tragedy is that the tragic hero will go insane. He has a period of madness. We saw that in the Duchess of Malfi, right? I mean, Ferdinand goes insane, and I mean, he's total DID. He's a total freak. He's a beast. He's like, he says, I'm a werewolf, right? And he's digging up graves, and he's got like a damn foot on his back. And they're like, dude, this Duke is crazy, right? Which again, sort of mirrors like I tend to think of like the Dutroux affair and all that, all that gross stuff. But Hamlet goes mad in the play. Now, he specifically states in certain sections that he frames his madness, right? That it's an act in order to uncover the motives of others. And actually more metaphysical. He's exploring he's like of reality and his intellect by going all the way and sort of crossing over this abyss of his intellect. But usually it's played as fake, right? That he's faking his madness. But I think that an interesting adaptation will show Hamlet as legitimately going insane. And that one particular production by Birmingham Rep, he did do that. And I remember watching, I saw it in like 2001. I remember watching it and thinking, oh no, this doesn't work. This is weird that Hamlet's actually going insane. But then the more as time went on in the play, it was truthful. Like, because the characters within the production, within the life of the production, they have to be truthful to the world in which they're playing. Right. Right. And it's sort of like the rule in, I'll give you a little inside knowledge here, folks. One of the things about comedy, of course, comedy, we've discussed before, comedy is so much more difficult than tragedy because it relies so heavily on timing, right? And not only that, but the humor has to be timeless. It has to remain relevant. And that's the reason why, you watch like movies that were funny in like 2000 and you watch them now and they're not fun. Like recently I watched that movie, you guys remember that movie Waiting with Ryan Reynolds? Like, it's about like the waiters, the servers. It's about a restaurant. It came out in the early 2000s. And at the time that movie was so funny, because it was like relevant, and like you're young and all that stuff. But I rewatched it recently and like it's not funny. And I'm sorry if like you watched it and you think it's funny. That's cool if you do. But it's not funny. Like the jokes like don't land, and you realize that like Ryan Reynolds is just playing Ryan Reynolds, and he's like just playing up for laughs, like temporarily. And there's also like this weird like creeper aspect of the movie that I did not get before. And I'm not going to go into, but if you watch it, like, it's weird. And that sort of speaks to why comedy is difficult, because you can't, the temptation, like if you were an actor and you were in a comedy, the temptation is to play the role for laughs. You want to make the audience laugh. If it's a play, if it's a film, you want to make the audience laugh. So you tell like sort of easy jokes, or you do silly things that are going to make them laugh. But actually what that does is it may make them laugh like in the moment because whatever you're doing is absurd, but it's not actually funny because it won't last. Once you see the funny thing, it's over. So like the true comedian or the true, like a good comedy will play the role truthfully. And an example, okay, so an example of that, this may seem like a weird example, but an example of that I think would be like Bill Murray's character in Caddyshack, right? Now, probably everybody's seen Caddyshack. It's, it's a classic. And the fashions in it obviously age, but like the humor like is still funny. And Bill Murray's character is probably the most complex character in the film because even though he's like this absurd character, Carl, right? In the film, he plays the role true, like he's truly dedicated to the role. Everything he does in the movie is like in that character. He never lets up. And if you don't know what I mean by that, like look at like Chevy Chase's character. Chevy Chase is also hilarious in that movie. He's hilarious. And he's still funny and I love it on the surface, but like some of the things and the mannerisms that Chevy Chase like does in the movie are like pure Chevy Chase of the time. And they don't, some of the things like don't really match the character that he's playing. And I'm not, again, like, I don't mean to criticize like Ty Webb. It's a great film. It's one of my favorite films, but Bill Murray is like obviously superior in terms of the role in that film. Does that make sense, guys? Okay. Sorry. I'm getting off on a tangent here. Where was I? How did I get on that little train? Let's see. Hey, you must have been something before electricity. Eh? You want to make $14 the hard way? Oh yeah, and of course, did you guys see the thumbnail for this? Right, I mentioned before is Arnie, and that comes from the movie Last Action Hero, which Jay and Jamie covered. I think they covered that. Last Action Hero. It's like 95, I think, with Arnold Schwarzenegger. 93 maybe. And it's like a send up of action roles. And there's a scene like where they go into a blockbuster and he sees Terminator, but it's Sly Stallone instead of Arnie. Anyway, one of the things in the movie is like the kid like, dissociates or whatever. And he's in the movie theater and he like sees himself within the movie roles. But one of the best scene in the movie is he's watching like a trailer for Hamlet, but it's Arnold as Hamlet. And it's like, something is rotten in the state of Denmark and Hamlet is taking out the trash. And like, it's funny because like, he actually really fits the role. Like he looks the role and he would be perfect in the role. Of course, he can't play Hamlet. His intellect, it doesn't allow for that. But in terms of like a surface level Hamlet, like the plot, it's amazing. And of course, they violate purposely the rules of Shakespeare, but that's what makes it funny, the irony, right? To be or not to be. Not to be. And he lights a cigar. Go back and watch the trailer for that. It's amazing. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Hamlet says at the end of Act 2, he's talking about the ghost, and he says, the spirit that I've seen may be the devil, and the devil hath power to assume a pleasing shape, yea, and perhaps out of my weakness and my melancholy, as he is very potent with such spirits, abuses me to damn me. I'll have grounds more relative than this. There you go. That's it. Right? Doesn't that vindicate my point? Right? About the ghost of Hamlet and the motivation for what he's doing in this play? I mean, perhaps we're looking at the entire play and the events of the play completely wrong. Maybe. I mean, I think that is supported by the text in the rest of the play because clearly that's in here. We just read that. Hamlet himself is questioning, is this some spirit that I've conjured? Is this, did Satan appear, right? You murdering ministers, right? Remember Macbeth? Did he appear in the guise of his dad? I mean, his dad, King Hamlet he looks like his father, but he's not. He's clearly not his father. And he erupted, right? He came from hell. He says he came from fire. Now, he says he came from fire in sort of an Anglo-Saxon, Dane, Viking way of like the blood feud, right? Clear my name, avenge me, avenge me. And then Hamlet later says, swear by thy sword. He tells his friend, swear by thy sword, swear by my sword. And the interpretation of that is like he's got the sword, he turns it in the hilt, like forms a cross, and they swear on it. Of course, they're still swearing on a sword. The sword is the later instrument of death and assassination that he'll use at the end of the play. Let's see. Let me look at the Bloom version. Couple of things here. Hamlet's soliloquy. Yes. Okay. Let's talk about Hamlet's soliloquy. Okay. His great, monologue on stage. And of course, if you're doing a film version, you can have the character's inner thoughts in a voiceover. Of course, usually we just have it with him speaking aloud. And in fact, if I were like producing this play, I would have Hamlet speaking aloud, even in the film version, because it sort of reinforces the idea of identity crisis, mirror images. Branagh does do one brilliant thing in the film. The beginning, when he confronts Gertrude and Claudius for the first time, there's of course the black and white checkerboard, dualistic dialectical floor, right? Which is reinforcing this, should I go this way or should I go that way, right? Light and dark. One thing that Bloom says is that Hamlet, the text of Hamlet reconciles the opposites. He doesn't go too high or too low. He sort of stays on this plane and he goes outward. And it takes place in a hall of mirrors, right? Because he's saying, who am I? And Hamlet is sort of within the play. He's not an everyman, but he encompasses all of the characters and sort of all of humanity. He explores the consciousness of what it means to be a human, even though we as the audience we are not Hamlet. We sort of see him doing this and we can relate, but we are not Hamlet. We are more of a Horatio character or a chorus character, right? Let's see. This famous soliloquy, it says, only 55 lines later, the most illustrious of all soliloquies begins Hamlet's next appearance, as probably the most famous verse passage in the language. Staled by repetition. Of course, it is staled by repetition. That's the shame, is that the soliloquy is so famous that it's almost impossible to do and like to not realize you're listening to this famous soliloquy. You become conscious of it, right? It challenges us to restore its authentic and perpetual freshness. Bloom says, best to state baldly, this is not a meditation seriously contemplating suicide. So let's just refresh ourselves real quick with the famous soliloquy. To be or not to be, that is the question. Now, first of all, let's think about this. The real estate, the world of a line of verse, right? Their universe, their ordered universe is a line of pentameter. Okay. And again, one line of iambic pentameter. The iambic means that the rhythm of the line is unstressed, stressed. Okay. That's called one poetic foot. Now, there are 5 poetic feet in the meter of the line, the length of the line, right? 5 pentameter, pentameter. And what does that signify? That signifies, it stands for their vision, their worldview, their vision of the world, right? It's ordered. It's always this way. Not to mention, it sort of mimics the natural rhythm of speech. And of course, the up and down notion of life, right? Waves, waveform, EKG, heartbeat, the gravity, literal waves of the sea, the up and down nature of life, right? Peaks and troughs, hills and valleys. Nowadays, our common English is probably more of a anapestic, which is like a 3-syllable, unstressed, stressed, stressed, rather than iambic. But at the time, it certainly was that. So in this line, notice that it is to be or not to be, so far it's iambic, right? That is the question. There are 11 syllables in this line. Okay, so that sounds like a small and petty point, but considering this is the most famous soliloquy in English literature, we have to analyze what that means, because whenever Shakespeare veers from the status quo, from the standard line, it has to be reinforced by the content. The form and the content have to match to produce meaning. So if the line is the standard da 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 da, iambic pentameter, 10 syllables, there it is. That's everything's fine, right? To be or not to be. But he adds the that is the question, right? We have 11 syllables. So what do you call it when you have a line of blank verse? That's the name. Unrhymed iambic pentameter is called blank verse. And you have an extra syllable. You call it an Alexandrin, right? Like Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great, because Alexander the Great like goes beyond the limits and conquers the entire world, right? If it's an unstressed syllable, it's called a feminine ending. If it's a stressed syllable, it's called a masculine ending. That is the question. It's a feminine ending. Okay? It goes on a downbeat. So why do we have 11 syllables? Because he's saying that there's a standard, but that there is more. He's looking for more. There's something else out there. He's going to go beyond the bounds. And that is what the rest of the soliloquy is about. To be or not to be, that's the question. But what is the question? Like, what does that mean, to be or not to be? He's not saying, should I live or die, right? He's questioning, first of all, what does it mean to be alive in the first place? What is a human being? What is life? Remember, we've discussed that literature, right? Art always points to two. There are always two things in art, right? There's always two metaphysical questions that are trying to be answered, right? Or there's two sort of things that we're always trying to get out of art. There's the question of who are we, right? And what's our relationship with each other? In other words, why are we here? Yes. Our relationship with God and our relationship with each other. What is the purpose of life? That's what literature does. And we've said that even when it doesn't do that, specifically when it doesn't do that, it's still doing that, right? Think of Beckett, right? Which is like this absurd, waiting for Godot, if you're English, waiting for Godot, right? Waiting for Godot, waiting for God. That's the name of the play. And it's this absurd, like nihilistic statement of like nothing matters. So the question is, the play is making a statement about like, oh, we're here. But in Beckett, it's like, oh, nothing matters, just nihilism, just chaos, right? But in Hamlet, he's like, what's the point? He's trying to figure it out. Now, of course, his solution is not the solution. Look at the end of the play. Now, I'm not saying I agree with his like postulating or his worldview. I'm saying that, and I'm also not saying that was Shakespeare's, but essentially that is Hamlet's, right? And he says, there's a colon at the end of the line, and he says, whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer. That's the end of the line. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer, next line, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or, right, whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer this, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. Okay, so he made a statement that there's the colon, and then he says, whether it's his nobler in the mind to suffer things or to take action is essentially what he's saying. Then he says to die, to sleep no more, and by a sleep to say, conversational, we end the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. In other words, he's saying that when you die, you go into the big sleep. and all of the pain is over. But then there's a colon. He says, "'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished." There's a religious aspect to this, right? Devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep. Second time he says that. To sleep. Okay. Perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of disprized love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes, when he himself might his quietus make with a bare bodkin? In other words, if you knew what the end was, right, would you jump the life to come, as Macbeth says, right? Would you jump the life to come on that farther shore if you knew what the end was? This is also a statement. This is a sincere and deep questioning about will, the idea of will, right? Yes, free will, also the pun on Will Shakespeare, and how far his will can be used, how far he can use when he knows it's possible that he will have to answer for those events, right? For those deeds. Also, when he himself might his quietus make with a bare body. Remember in the Duchess of Malfi, the quietus, right? When the Duchess signs the quietus est, it's also the death warrant of Antonio. Who would fardels bear to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country, from whose bourne no traveler returns, puzzles the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. Right now, we're sort of getting hermetic aspects in this soliloquy, right? Because shuffled off this mortal coil seems to be an obvious statement about the corruption of the human body, except for he's saying, like, if we can use our will to transcend our corrupted shell to know what is to come, who would do the things in life that we have now? Thus, conscience does make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought. And enterprises of great pitch and moment with this regard, their currents turn awry and lose the name of action. The verbiage in this, the diction, the verb, the the vocabulary in this is so it's so complex and so intense. Now notice that, like, the syntax, of course, plays into the form and content produce meaning here. Like, I mean, clearly. And the syntax, it's sort of an inverted syntax and a jumbled syntax, because that indicates that the thoughts swirling in Hamlet's mind, right? It's not ordered. There are long, compound, complex sentences. There are colons, semicolons. He repeats phrases. There's repetition. There are questions. There are a lot of questions. Right? What do you think about this speech? I mean, we've all heard this a million times, and especially if you're an actor. I mean, I think actually one hot take about Hamlet. I've said before that obviously poems, verse, literature, well, especially poetry, is meant to be experienced in two ways, right? It's meant to be seen on the page, right, and heard aloud. It's also, it's auditory, right? And a play, especially a verse play, is meant to be performed. It's meant to be acted. But Hamlet is sort of an exception to that, because just like Hamlet sort of tries to transcend the bounds of existence or his own reality or the state, right? Um, the play sort of transcends any ability to adapt it, to perform it. I mean, I've never seen, and many critics will say this, uh, that they've never seen. I mean, Harold Bloom said this, right? That he'd never seen a production of Hamlet that satisfied the play, right? I mean, if you've ever seen like, like again, a Tennessee Williams play, right? Like A Streetcar Named Desire. Remember, Stella. What we have here in the state of Louisiana is the Napoleonic Code, right? Which says that whatever belongs to the wife heretofore belongs to the husband. Well, that play, you can't watch that play now because it's Brando's play. It's like Brando, like that is the play, right? You're just comparing it to Brando in the play. And it's obviously like meant to be performed on the stage. Yes. In fact, it doesn't really read well in text, right? But Hamlet is sort of the opposite. It reads so well and the characters come so alive that it's almost impossible to perform. I don't know how you would do. I think maybe a way to perform this would actually be like something that's now sort of in vogue and is actually losing steam now, and that's the the long form like Netflix TV show, right? Remember, I mentioned in one of the streams, Too Old to Die Young, right, by Nicholas Winding Refn, which is like he said he was offered a chance to make it into a film, but he chose to go with Amazon for a number of reasons, obviously. But one of the artistic reasons was he could make a 10-hour movie, right? And so he has time to explore these things. Now that's sort of going downhill because as these things become more popular, they become more stale, right? I mean, look at like Ozark and Stranger Things, like they just lose steam. There's too much time. It's not written well enough. The first season of True Detective is like perfect. And I like the other seasons, but if there's a fourth season, like the risk is that there are too many episodes. It's too long. They need to condense it. But with Hamlet, like that might be the thing, right? That might be the only way. Of course, then you would lose the momentum of the action of the play. But that might be the only way to produce, to make a physical production of Hamlet that like does the play any justice. And isn't that weird, right? Isn't it ironic that Shakespeare, the master of the theatrical, right, the master of the theater, writes a play that is unplayable, in my opinion. I mean, there are just so many bad productions. Again, I like the Branagh version, but like it's it's like okay, now we're watching we're 3 hours and 30 minutes into the play in the movie, and it's like now we're just watching it because he wanted to be the first to like set a record for the whole thing, right? The Olivier version is great because it's so iconic, but it also can be a bit wanky and sort of even propagandistic, right? The Ethan Hawke version is like, okay, we're going to make it hip because he's young, but he's actually not young enough. And again, that's one of the things about Hamlet's character is that like, Jay's talked about this recently. It's like when you're young, you think you know it all, and then when you get older, you realize like you don't really know anything at all. There's so much to know. And my take on that would be that, the things that I thought back then when I was young is still the core of what I think now. A lot of those, the core things haven't changed. But certainly you begin to realize as you get older, not like I'm some old wise dude or whatever, but you begin to realize that like you begin to know what you don't know, if that makes sense, right? I know that I don't know math. I understand the concept of math, but I'm not good at math. I understand like the concept of like, quantum physics, but like, I don't know quantum physics. I can't do that. I don't know that. I don't know like presidential trivia, right? I know classical music and I know like probably more than the average person, but like I don't know. I'm not able to like go through encyclopedia in an encyclopedic fashion and like identify composers. That's just something I know that I don't know. Does that make sense? But Hamlet is this young guy who is very well read and sophisticated, intellectual, and he's like in the top of society, and nobody can match him. But he's also like overzealous, and he's a jerk, and he becomes violent, dangerous, and murderous. Right now, that's not accidental. That's part of the point of the play because that's his role, right? His he thinks that his father's role as head of state has been usurped, and of course he himself is questioning whether he should do that. Why would he do it? He's going to inherit the throne, and Claudius is good to him, right? Well, it's because it's an affront to the what he sees as the goodness or the order of their familial and national state. Of course, Hamlet also he's chaotic in the play, right? I don't want to say a chaos agent, but he certainly brings that into their world. Look at the play within the play, right? The Mousetrap. It's called the Mousetrap. And I read one statement about the Mousetrap, which was that. Oh yeah. Let's see. I think it was Yeats. I think it was Yeats who wrote this about the Mousetrap and in Hamlet. Of course, we've covered Yeats. Go see my Yeats stream, right? We did the Second Coming. Hamlet is the Yeats said this. I think Hamlet is the freest character in literature. And what do I mean by that? Well, we've discussed the idea of what is freedom, what is liberty, right? What is liberation, and we can't help but think of obviously things like the hermetic, Gnostic Crowleyan idea of freedom, which is that to him who nothing is sacred, everything is permitted, right? And that's sort of Hamlet's mode, but he does understand the sacred. He violates the sacred, but he understands and respects the sacred. In fact, that's the whole reason why he's pissed off, right? Because the sanctity of his dad as the king has been violated. Now, whether that's simply a youthful rebellion as a result of the trauma of his father's death, which is something that is valid and understandable. Although it's a little emo. I mean, Hamlet is emo as hell, right? He is described in the text as his inky black. He dresses in black. He's mourning, but he dresses in black throughout the play. Again, with the Branagh Hamlet, he's got this mustache, and like also, why is Jack Lemmon one of the guards, right, at Elsinore? Like, I love Jack Lemmon, but he's like 90 years old in the movie. Why is he standing guard at the castle? That doesn't make any sense, right? Dude, you got soldiers. You don't need this old dude. Why does Hamlet and all of his friends, like, they've got this like weird facial hair, and like they're supposed to be 20, but like they're obviously like in their late 30s or 40s. And Branagh obviously got them because they're in his Renaissance troupe. I think that's the name of Branagh's theater company or his film company, right? He does, though, what I love in that movie, side note, is that the guy who plays the ghost of Hamlet, whom again Shakespeare probably played on stage, is played by the actor Brian Blessed. You know Brian Blessed, you guys? He is famous for being a Gordon's alive, right? Remember in Flash Gordon? He's this big bearded guy, large English actor. He was in Star Wars. Remember when in Shut the Phantom Menace? Remember in the Phantom Menace when they had to go underwater to that like little frog kingdom or whatever? He was the guy. But Brian Blessed, I've always liked Brian Blessed because he's this jolly character, and he went to my drama school. I think he passed away actually. And he's really good as King Hamlet because he's got gravitas. He's a little, he is a little melodramatic, but of course that's Branagh directing him. But like in that film, there are like multiple, like there are longs. There's a long series of close-ups, like on Brian Blessed's like mouth. It's like this close to his mouth, and he's like, "I swear by thy soul, swear." And it's like, okay, we don't need that, dude. So. There's an Akira Kurosawa version of Hamlet. It's let's see, it's called, I can't remember it. I've got it up there but it takes place in a Japanese like 1950s corporate office. Of course, Hamlet comes up in I haven't seen The Northman yet, but I think it came up, right? Didn't it come up in The Northman? And of course, it's become this archetypal struggle, right? And it's emulated in multiple works of fiction, literature, and film. But of course, the source material is the play's the thing, right? Let's see. Hamlet is. I'm not sure if he's a slave to his passions. That's an interesting thing to consider. Yeats said that the play within the play is a meta play. Bloom disagrees; it's not a meta play, but it is a puppet show, and we realize that, Hamlet himself is a kind of puppet, right? He's being played by the ghost of Hamlet. But then we realize that are we the theater? Are we the show? Right? First, we think, okay, we're the audience. So in the play, we're the audience watching the audience watching the audience, right? Because the play within the play, and the audience we're watching is Gertrude and Claudius and them, and then they're watching an audience, which is watching the Queen Hecuba sequence, and that probably takes a whole other stream because that is specifically and explicitly occult, right? They have the Queen of Witches, Hecuba, as the play within the play, which indicates and sort of signifies the witchcraft conjuring element that drives the plot of this whole play, right? And Hamlet is trying to, in a really weird, like Gnostic sense, trying to be a kind of a demiurge, right? Like playing the other people in real life as mirror characters of themselves in order to discover their true will so that he himself can discover his true will so that he can break on through to the other side, so to speak, and determine, the name of action, right? But while we're watching that, it's interesting to consider, like, are we watching the audience, but actually, are we the audience actually the play? Are we being played? Are we the puppets? Right? Is he playing us? He's certainly playing with our emotions. Let's see. So there's an implied reproach. The chorus is not a protagonist. With a fierce wit, Hamlet replies, I could interpret between you and your love if I could see the puppets dallying, when he's directing the play. Ophelia has no other love. Hamlet would be spectator to his own dalliance. The copulating puppets have no voice without the interpreter. Oscar Wilde, interpreting the enormous influence of Hamlet, remarked that the world has grown melancholy because a puppet, the prince, was sad. The Mousetrap is a puppet show, but so is Hamlet, at least until the end of Act 4. Well, that's interesting, right? Because Hamlet is a puppet. We just discussed how he's a puppet in that sense. He's also, is he a geopolitical puppet? Right? Is he a puppet? Is he an unwitting puppet of Fortinbras, the Deus Ex Machina, the outside character, who at the end of the play, it's like he walks into the castle and he's handed the entire nation. He's handed the keys to the kingdom. There's obvious, there has to be a state level collusion with Fortinbras because they allow him to cross over their land to take parts of Poland. But again, Hamlet wonders about that. And he's like, why would he do that? And what does that mean for me? Let's see. Hamlet, the Gnostic hermeticist. Okay, this is a good little part that I found. Let's see. The foreground to Shakespeare's tragedy is Hamlet's consciousness of his own. Okay, this is pretty cool. The foreground to Shakespeare's tragedy is Hamlet's consciousness of his own consciousness, unlimited yet at war with itself. One of the reasons that I subtitled, subtitled the stream, "Poem Unlimited," is because Polonius, in Polonius's first speech, he's talking about, or when he's introducing the play within a play, he's like describing various kinds of tragedy, tragicomedy, comedy, tragedy history. And then the last thing he says is poem unlimited. And Bloom's thesis is that, you know, Hamlet itself is the poem unlimited. And he's right in many ways. But is Hamlet's consciousness unlimited? Well, it certainly has its limits, right? He's not a god. He's not a demigod, even though we could figuratively say that he is certainly he has many Miltonian satanic, even though it precedes Milton, he has many of the aspects of a Miltonian satanic character. He's rebelling, right? He's rebelling against his father. He does everything to subvert the order of their kingdom. And of course, at the end, like, he chooses destruction, right? Though Shakespeare's overtly hermetic, though Shakespeare's overtly hermetist influences or references are scattered elsewhere, sometimes in unlikely contexts like Coriolanus, I belatedly agree with Dame Frances Yates that the Shakespearean theater of the world has subtle links to visionaries like Giordano Bruno and Robert Flood. Shouts out to Kotel. He's discussed Flood. Shakespeare was not like Victor Hugo and W.B. Yeats, an occultist, right? Yeats was a blatant occultist, right? The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, right? But then he was not any other single thing either, be it Catholic, royalist, or conservative. Preternaturally, he picked up anything useful to him that was available in his era. I hesitate to call any particular utterance by Hamlet a central statement, but this comes closest. He says, what piece of work is a man? How noble in reason, how infinite in faculties, in form and moving, how express and admirable in action, how like an angel in apprehension, how like a god. That's Act 2, Scene 2, lines 303 to 307. One knows that Shakespeare was not Pico de Mirandola, Hermeticist, Kabbalist, Neoplatonist, but Pico would have been happy to agree that in apprehension we could again be gods. Hamlet uniquely fuses apprehension and comprehension and could be viewed as the Hermeticist anthropos, or man god, come again. Wittenberg have taught Hamlet, even in the arts of literature and the theater. Hamlet potentially is a great poet dramatist, like his creator, who attended no university, Shakespeare. We do not and need not know Shakespeare's prime malaise, but we know Hamlet's. To be a mortal god in an immortal play. Any Fortinbras or Laertes could chop Claudius down. Hamlet knows he deserves the prime role in a cosmological drama, which Shakespeare was not quite ready to compose. Well, that certainly sums up one aspect of Hamlet, right? And again, that vindicates my sort of thesis about the play, or at least one line of thought about the meaning of the play, which is that Hamlet is he's sort of a proto-Gnostic demigod on a quest for meaning and transcendence by breaking through the bounds of the order of his kingdom, right? Of course, he, in a way, you could say he achieves this, right? Because he dies and he accomplishes his goal at the end of the play. But does he transcend, right? In fact, I think Act 5 specifically changes him. Of course, that's when he gets back from his journey with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern across the ocean. Again, it's like a baptism, but it's a baptism into pure nihilism. It's like destruction. It's like obliteration. He thinks that he can be free by never existing, but not in a suicidal sense. It's through a sort of like a Gotterdammerung or something, right? And he never says that he wants to tear down the whole kingdom, but that is what he does, right? See, another Gnostic element of the play. Hamlet utters a total of almost 20 more lines after that let it be. He says, "You that look pale and tremble at this chance, that are but mutes or audience to this act, had I but time, right? Had we but whirled enough in time, this coyness, lady, were no crime." Is that Robert Herrick? "Had I but time, as this fell sergeant, death is strict in his arrest. Oh, I could tell you, but let it be." That's where "let it be" comes from, right? Beatles. Act 5, Scene 2, lines 339 to 343. Hamlet utters a total of almost 20 more lines after that "let it be," so that one can experience a certain frustration at not being told part, at least, of what is hinted. We are addressed specifically as audience, reminding us again of how readily this play has forsaken its supposed function of representation and instead has offered itself to us as the thing itself. The play's the thing, right? Hamlet, the play's the thing, right? The play's the thing wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king. The play's the thing. He's an actor. But not only is he an actor, but all the world's a stage. His world is a stage, right? And we are merely players, right? Remember Macbeth? It is a tale. Let's see. It is a tale by a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Now, is Macbeth a nihilist? I will go back and see my Macbeth analysis, but I would say no. But that Hamlet seems to be an actual nihilist at this point, right? Let's see. He says, he wants us, the unsatisfied, to exonerate him, lest he bear a wounded name. That wager he goes on winning. You have to be quite an advanced literary critic not to love him. Hardly an original observation for me to make, says Hurlbut. Yet he seems to want to tell us something beyond our relationship to him. He says that he is already dead, an acknowledgement he could have made in the graveyard. Unlike his father, he is not a ghost, but a resurrected spirit about to die. This says, in the pattern of the Jesus of the Gnostic heretics. I suggest that had he time, he could tell us something about the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns, right? Which is to say, if Hamlet had time. So one difference between Hamlet and the other three of the great Shakespearean tragedies, right? Macbeth, Othello, and King Lear, is that when the title character, when the tragic hero meets his end in those plays, right? Death. The play is wrapped up. The life of the play is wrapped up and there's order. But in Hamlet, all the way up to the very end, it's like he says, I don't have enough time. There's not enough time. So what Bloom just said was, perhaps, if Hamlet could transcend, right? If he could be if he could be a transhumanist and, a technocrat and go to the other world, he could come back and tell us about that undiscovered country. Of course, Hamlet speaks about this from a purely intellectual viewpoint, not purely intellectual, but certainly there is little that is, there's definitely little that is Christian in Hamlet. It informs his words and his ideas, but there's nothing specifically, he's not, Hamlet in the play there's one thing that he's not looking for in this play, and that is love. He never wants love, right? And that's unusual to consider, right? Just on a human level, one that we can relate to. That's certainly one that I don't think people can't to which one can we can relate, right? Humans want love, right? We want love, we want affection, we want to be valued, but we also want to give love, right? We receive love by giving. We serve. Does Hamlet serve? I mean, who does he serve? Well, he serves. I guess you would say, who does he serve? Well, I guess he serves. He serves this ghost. He serves Satan, right? That seems to be certainly true in the play. I mean, he references that throughout the play, right? That this ghost was a demon, And he reconciles it by saying, well, it's almost Faustian, because it's like, oh, he can gain knowledge of what he's to do because of how he received it. But it also supersedes Faust, because he's not just interested in knowledge, right? He's interested in like something bigger. I think that's what makes it. I want to say Hamlet is a Gnostic play, but there's certainly so many Gnostic ideas in it. Anyway, I think that is probably going to conclude my Hamlet analysis. I mean, I could babble about this for endlessly. And we've looked at specific parts of the text. We could look at specific passages that simply reinforce what we've discussed tonight. I think that either I'll have to do that another time and continue it, or maybe I'll have to just write it. It's a massive play, and I don't mean that in the sense that that it's daunting. I don't think it's daunting. I think it's welcoming. It's a welcoming play. Of course, I recommend reading the play. Everyone should read this play. I mean, it's one of the cornerstones of art and literature, and things that man has made. There's so much to it. It's given us so many words and phrases. Some of my favorite, of course, I said the other day, my favorite speech in this play, my favorite soliloquy is it's never performed. Actually, you know what? I just remembered that I used that soliloquy. Here's a little personal story, guys. The soliloquy that I chose, I was applying for a theater scholarship for college when I was a senior in high school. And I had to go off to Memphis to do it. And the classical piece that I chose was from Hamlet. And the particular soliloquy that I chose was I got it from this movie with Robert Downey Jr. It's called Two Girls and a Guy. And it was directed by that creeper, James Toback. And that movie was made in 3 days when Robert Downey Jr. was on leave. Remember, he was in trouble in the 90s. It's got him and Heather Graham and this other girl. There's 3 people in the whole movie, but he plays a rap actor who it's a really good movie. It's actually really well done, but his mother is kind of a Gertrude character off screen, and she dies in the course of the events of the play. And he does a soliloquy from Hamlet, and he says, "I am the melancholy Dane." And that's where I got the idea to do that soliloquy, and it served me well. It's a great speech, right? Thing about restless ecstasy. My pulse as yours doth temperately keep time, and makes this healthful music. It is not madness I have uttered. Bring me to the test, and I the matter will reword, which madness would gamble from. Mother, for love of grace, lay not that flattering unction to your soul, that not your trespass, but my madness speaks. It will but skin and film the ulcerous place, whilst rank corruption, mining all within, infects unseen. Confess yourself to heaven. Repent what's past. Avoid what is to come. And do not spread the compost on the weeds to make them ranker. Forgive me this my virtue, for in the fatness of these pursy times, virtue itself of vice must pardon, beg, yea, curb and woo for leave to do him good. But she says, Hamlet, thou hast cleft my heart in twain. There are so many good speeches in this, and many of them are from, I'm sorry for that. Many of them from lesser known characters. I mean, the gravedigger in this is amazing. And in fact, if you were producing an adaptation of this play, it's best to have a well-known, a physical comedian almost to do this. I don't want to say Jim Carrey, because that sounds wanky and I don't like Jim Carrey, but in a way he would be really good to play the gravedigger. And Yorick is one of the best characters in the play, and he's not even in the play, right? Alas, poor Yorick, I knew him once, holding the skull. Horatio is kind of he's the best friend, but he's kind of a straight character. Laertes is you know, he's like, you hate Laertes because he's annoying. Polonius would be fun. Gertrude and Claudius hardly have much to say, even though the play is about them essentially. But Gertrude does have this one soliloquy where she eulogizes Ophelia, and that one speech is really, really famous because the language is so rich and gives us a kind of the Ophelia aesthetic, right? Remember Jim Morrison's poem "Ode to Brian Jones," dead in L.A. 27. He wrote it about when Brian Jones from the Rolling Stones drowned, and there's the lines: Ophelia, leaves sodden in silk, chlorine dream, mad stifled witness. The angel man finally claimed this benevolent soul. Ophelia is like this, like ethereal. She's a pure character. She's used up and berated by Hamlet, and she's used by her dad Polonius also to spy on Hamlet. She's like one of the real tragic characters in the play. Many female actresses, like, it's their goal to play Ophelia. Of course, if you're a female actress, you should want to play, of course, Lady Macbeth. And if you're a male actress, you want to play Hamlet and Iago. We should talk about Othello sometime in the future, because we've covered Macbeth, we've covered Hamlet. We might as well do the other two tragedies sometime soon in the future. King Lear, which is also massive, and Othello, which is an interesting and odd play. Let's see. Jim Morrison is William Shakespeare kept alive through witchcraft. I've got the documents, folks. James Douglas Morrison. James Douglas. Right? James Douglas. Hold on, I'm going to get two books. One is... Where's that other book? Here we go. Oh. Yes, James Douglas. Here we go. Francis Yates, who was referenced in that Bloom essay. This is a good book. Let's see, I read this in 2002. I must have read this right after I read. It's so weird, you guys. Like, I read this book. The first time I read this book was in 2003, and I feel like it was. I pulled it off the shelf. I feel like it was yesterday. It's 19 years ago. And Francis Yates, The Occult Philosophy in the Elizabethan Age. Shouts out to Natesky because he knows Francis Yates. Right, it's a good book. And the other one, James Douglas Morrison. James Douglas from Robert the Bruce. It's a real guy. This is a great book. This is totally off topic, but this is history. Of course, I've told you guys that I love reading history the most. And Robert the Bruce is one of my ancestors. And this book by Ronald McNair Scott is the definitive book on Robert the Bruce. And of course, it contains the stories about James Douglas, known as the Black Douglas, who was a formidable warrior and a legend, right? Crispy got that book. Crispy, as a proud Celt, right, has that book. Shouts out to Crispy. Shouts out to Kristen, again, at Slowboy Whiteboard. Oh, no. Was that sagging? I'm sorry, you guys. Wow. My bad. My bad, folks. I'm sorry. I forgot about the rules of etiquette, and I stood up, and I must have been sagging. I'm sorry. Forgive me for that. Oops. Shouts out to everybody in the chat, everybody who joined me tonight. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody who shared this also as well. And let's see. Let's check. Have anything else? Let's see. Oh, we got a $10. Yes, $10 donation from Devin Allman. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Thank you so much. Of course, we had $5 from Schultz Deals, and then Rachel at Based Homeschool Mom donates $5, and she said, "How dare you apologize for that inspiring little performance? It was great." Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. That's the extent of my acting life now. But everybody should. I mean, we're all grown-ups now, so. But I think it's cool to. I mean, I kind of have a head start because, like I've discussed before, that like memorization played a major role in my own education. And of course, education looks down on memorization now. They think it's like low tier. But I would disagree because everything that I was made to memorize in school from every age, I remember. Now, maybe that's just my um, hyperthymesia or whatever, right? And just remembering that stuff or whatever. But, um, you know, it, that's part of close reading, intertextuality, and like look at the people that we read and that we watch, right? I mean, look at Jay. Jay's got an encyclopedic memory for the written word and for material, right? He can sort of walk into his mind palace and recall specific passages and events and dates and people with something that seems superhuman. A lot of, we all know people like that, right? So I think that it's cool whenever a person, I'm not saying that sounded weird. I'm not saying that I have that. I'm saying that like I enjoy being able to recall um, passages in text that are meaningful to me that apply to other passages, if that makes sense. And I think that's just like, I think that's pretty normal. That's common. Think about, everybody does that when you watch a movie or you read a book and you recall how it relates to other things, right? That's analogy, metaphor, meaning, symbolism. Kristen said, we need a 500 sub party stream. Yes, we definitely need, where are we right now? We've got, how many we got? Oh, you guys, we're 4 short. We are 4 short of 500 subs. That's big. I think that's big time, you guys. I can't believe that like we've got what we have now. That's crazy to me. And thank you to everybody who's watching this now live and who's going to watch it later. I appreciate you. Thank you for coming here to the channel, and I appreciate you watching. And hopefully you are having fun, enjoying this, and maybe find it edifying. So thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate you. We're 4 short. So when we have 500 subs, you guys, why don't we plan to do our first, what do we call it? Right. Our Bays Lit Breathalyzer Party. You guys, we'll do something crazy. We'll do something off topic. And it'll be fun. And we'll just, I don't know, we'll copy the others, right? We'll sing, dance, and do impressions. I think that's cool. I was going to say 500 or 10K views because we're getting up there, right? We're getting up there. We're almost at 9K views. That's pretty cool. And that's a huge, I mean, that's awesome. Thank you. So, but I guess we'll do it at 500 because that's going to be first. So next stream we do, if we can get 4 more subs, we'll do a 500 party and that'll be cool. We'll just mess around and we'll be fun. We won't do anything serious. We won't do any Shakespeare. We won't do any like serious literature. If we do some literary analysis, it'll be something fun or crazy or like that we didn't expect, something off topic. And if you have suggestions, can we go deep Caddyshack? That's a good idea. We could do some film analysis. I mean, I've seen a lot of movies. And so yeah, we could definitely go deep Caddyshack, right? So yeah, put your suggestions in the comments below after the stream is over. Please make sure you like, you guys. Thank you, everybody who always likes the stream. Please make sure you like, share it somewhere, even if it's just word of mouth, right? Yo, there's this dude. Bays Lit Breathalyzer or something. So that'll be cool. And thank you to everybody who's already done that. Really appreciate it. Let's see. Bill Murray night. Yeah, that'd be cool. Bill Murray's got some good flicks, of course. We would have to do some like lesser known Bill Murray. Lost in Translation is not lesser known, but have you guys seen Lost in Translation? Right. What do you think of it? You know what I was thinking? Actually, if we were going to do a film analysis, a theme. This is so off topic, but we would Guys and Dolls so Biela can sing it as Brando. Are you an assassin? I'm a soldier, sir. You're neither. You're an errand boy sent by grocery clerks to collect the bill. Right. Do you live near the river? We could just do all of Apocalypse Now. We could just do impressions of the whole thing, right? Hey, buddy, you gonna shut the door? Let's see. We could do a breakdown of Apocalypse Now. The script, I actually have the book, the John Milius book. Did you guys know that the voiceovers in Apocalypse Now were written by damn, now that I say that, I can't remember his name. The dude who wrote the things they carry. No, Dispatches. Michael, what's his name? Michael Herr, is that his name? Who wrote Dispatches? Definitive Vietnam book. Damn, I shouldn't have brought that up. Now I can't get his name right. Anyway, he wrote the voiceovers. And we could talk about just random Apocalypse Now. I honestly, I'm not bragging, folks, but I think I know everything related to Apocalypse Now. It's my favorite movie of all time. Oh, no, but earlier I was thinking, it was yesterday, it occurred to me, if we were going to do a film analysis stream, it would be a weird and random and fun one to do, would be a bodyguard themed film analysis. We would start with The Bodyguard with Costner and Whitney Houston, which you may think that that's weird, and it is. But I rewatched it yesterday because it was on Boomer Antenna TV, and I turned it on the scene right when she's going on stage, and she's not singing I Have Nothing. She's scared because somebody wants to attack her, and she's wearing this weird metropolis type costume. And what does she walk through? It's like an Egyptian set, and she walks through the Jacob and Boaz, right? She walks through the twin Masonic pillars, right? And then she transcends, right? She's lifted up by Costner. And so anyway, yeah, there are a lot of good bodyguard movies. There's that. There's remember what's the Liam Neeson movie? I have a very particular set of skills. What's that movie, you guys? The famous one from 2008. What's the movie? Liam Neeson. I have a particular set of skills. Somebody tell me. Taken. Thank you, Jeff. It's look, I sit here and I think of, and all this swirls through the mind, but then of course when you get on here, you can't remember things and you have dementia. Taken, remember, starts off with just a blatant, it's kind of a ripoff of The Bodyguard. Remember, because he's a bodyguard for the Australian actress who's playing the pop singer. And remember, he's with his CIA friends who are off duty, Black Ops guys. We could do probably the worst bodyguard movie of all time is have you guys ever seen Proof of Life? Proof of Life. Right. Well, do you have Proof of Life? Right. Russell Crowe and Meg Ryan, where he says the phrase proof of life 400 times in the movie. Right. What, does she have proof of life? Is it proof of life? Do you have proof of life? Right. We have to have proof of life. And then all of a sudden that phrase made its way into the common parlance, right? Guarding Tess. Yeah, that would count. Little Nick Cage. Who is that with? Jessica Tandy? Oh, look, shouts out to Tam. Hey, Tamara. Good to see you. Thank you for coming here. Love you. Always love seeing our OG homie, Tamara Hathaway, who, by the way, everybody should go to her channel and like and sub and share her videos because she's amazing. It's Shirley MacLaine. Oh, Shirley MacLaine, actually, you guys know this. Have I said this before? Random. Does anybody know who Shirley MacLaine's brother is? Go. You have 7 seconds. Shirley MacLaine's brother. Jeff's got it. Jeff is the Kazang. Shirley MacLaine's brother is Warren Beatty. Most people don't know that. For all you young people out there, Warren Beatty is an actor who was a big time Hollywood playboy and who played basically Jay Sebring, right, of the Manson murders in the movie Shampoo, which is also dramatized in the movie Blow with Johnny Depp because it was a front for DRUG ops. But yes, Warren Beatty and Shirley MacLaine are a brother and sister, and they are from Richmond, Virginia. Who else? Let's see. What's another bodyguard movie? Taken, Guarding Tess, The Bodyguard. What else? Proof of Life. Give me another bodyguard movie, you guys. Let's see. Steven Seagal. Hard to Kill. Hard to Kill is a bodyguard movie. Man on Fire is a Denzel bodyguard movie. That's a good one. Oh, the best one, my favorite bodyguard movie, which I don't know if you guys have seen this. It's a little, it's European. It's European cinema. It premiered at the Cannes Film Festival, and it's a movie. In the American title is Disorder, and the French title is what's the French title? The French title is Maryland, and it stars what's her name? Diane Kruger as the wife of a Lebanese arms dealer, and she has to be protected by Matthias. What's his name? Matthias Schoenaert, the Belgian actor. I love, dude. That guy's awesome in every movie. If you've seen him, Matthias. How do you say his name? Matthias Schoenaert. But he plays a basically ex French Foreign Legionnaire who he's a bodyguard for them at a party, and then he foils plot against her, and he's got a traumatic brain injury from war, and the soundtrack is by Gesaffelstein, my favorite French industrial electro artist. Gesaffelstein. It's a really great soundtrack, and it's a really well done movie because it's impressionistic. It really gets it. Called Disorder or Maryland. Olympus Has Fallen, one of those. Which one with Channing Tatum? What's the one Rachel says where the guy is guarding the president? Was it Will Smith movie? I can only vaguely remember it. There was White House Down. White House Down has Jamie Foxx and Channing Tatum. And then there's Olympus Has Fallen, and its sequel, London Has Fallen, right, with Gerard Butler, who has the great line. He's American in the movie, but all of a sudden he becomes Scottish again in the movie, and he has the great line, "Things are about to get sporty." He literally says that in the movie. He's talking to an English SAS guy, and he goes, "Things are about to get sporty." The third Olympus Has Fallen has the nanobots. It has the army of nanobots. You remember that? Terrible movie, but it does have that in it. And actually, I like Olympus Has Fallen. I like that movie. It's a trash movie, but it's pretty good. Of course, the bad guys in that are the North K's, right? Who take over and who actually take over in a violent version of JAN 6. It's pretty ridiculous. Remember what Norm Macdonald said about North Korea? He said in his final stand-up, he did the final stand-up act on David Letterman when Letterman was going off the air, and he said, people are afraid of North Korea, right? They wake up in a cold sweat. Oh, Kim Jong-il or whatever. He said, that country doesn't scare me. Some little, country over there in the middle of nowhere on the other side of the world. The country that scares me is the country of Germany, right? Because about 100 years ago, they decided to go to war with the world, right? And they almost won. And then about 20 years later, we won. Then about 20 years later, they had this guy, Crankly Shrankly, that guy with the mustache. And then they really almost won, right? I didn't do that justice at all, but I wasn't trying to do like a Norm impression or joke. I was just telling you what the joke is. Go look up I'm Not Norm, the channel I'm Not Norm. And then go to his final Letterman act, classic Norm. Indiana Jones deep dive stream. They took these stones from here. They took these stones from here. Stole that directly from Jay, of course. They took these stones from here. What's your favorite Indiana Jones movie? Short Round absolutely rules. He dominates the movie. And Jay's covered that movie, Temple of Doom. Of course, that movie is incredibly dark, right? Think of the plot, right? I mean, it's Kali, Kalima, Shakti Day, Malicha Hat, Om Nam Chabai, Om Nam Chabai, Om Nam Chabai. That movie came out in 1984, and we had it on tape, and I watched it like 100 times. And it's looking back on it, it's an insane movie, right? I mean, it's like they're in a satanic Kali temple cult, and they're doing what with KIDS and mind control, right? And rituals in a pit of fire. It's unbelievable. My favorite Indiana Jones, I think, is probably The Last Crusade, because Henry, right? Let my armies be the trees and the rocks and the birds in the sky. Henry, the pen is mightier than the sword, right? Junior, now in Greek. River Phoenix is in that. One little thing that's cool in that movie. Is remember when River Phoenix? Everybody knows this, but remember when River Phoenix is like taming the lions, and he's got the whip, and he gets the scar right here. Well, that's because Harrison Ford has a famous scar right here, and I don't know when he got that, but to tie this back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, what did Harrison Ford do before he was an actor? Hello. Trivia, go. You've got 3 seconds. What did Harrison Ford do before he was an actor? Go. He was a carpenter. Jeff got it, of course. And who was he a carpenter for? Specifically building sets for whom? Chris, probably. Who was he a roadie for, famously? And he's in the background in a couple of documentaries. He's a little bit older, and who was he a roadie for? And he's talked about it in some interviews. 3 seconds, go. Harrison Ford was a roadie and built sets for, yes, Rachel, The Doors. Yep, he knew Jim Morrison. And he's in the background of some of the documentaries. It's pretty crazy, right? It's pretty cool. We could do a Doors deep dive, of course. I count myself as an expert in Doors lore. I've got Ray's an autographed photo of Ray around here somewhere that my friend got for me before he died. Ray Manzarek, of course, was in military intelligence, if you didn't know that. People always bring up Jim, right? Rightly so, because his dad was, Gulf of Tonkin. There's some interesting theories, you probably heard them, about what happened to Jim. It's accepted now. Everybody knows. They probably always have known it. That Jim died. He OD'd in that in the Rock and Roll Circus, which was the club owned by the Rolling Stones in Paris, and he was sold the. He OD'd on heroin, and he was sold it by Marianne Faithfull's boyfriend, who was this Italian count. He was a dealer to the stars or whatever. But there are theories which sound kind of plausible that it was also revenge. Maybe they were working through him for things having to do with his dad, right? The same goes with Hendrix. Have you guys heard the thing about, Hendrix's manager was MI5, right? And the autopsy of Hendrix showed that that Hendrix, I think he choked on his, vomit in his sleep. But then when they did the autopsy, they found that like he had wine in his stomach, but it was undigested, and that indicated that somebody had opened his throat and poured it in. And actually, one more thing about Hamlet before we go. That reminds me of, there's a scene in the movie Caligula, which was financed by not Playboy. Was it Bob Guccione? Yeah, it was financed by one of them. And there's a scene where they kill a centurion by doing that. The character Claudius. Is it Claudius? No, Tiberius, played by Peter O'Toole. He kills a guy that way, and that's actually mentioned in Suetonius and in Tacitus. Well, there are interesting parallels between that and Hamlet, because of course the character Claudius. Because what was it, Claudius? I wrote this down earlier. Claudius. Let's see. Yeah. So in Suetonius or Tacitus, or maybe both, when they describe Nero and how Nero's mother Agrippina killed her husband Claudius, right? The Emperor Claudius, and that is mirrored in Hamlet. In the play within the play. And of course, Hamlet's stepfather is Claudius, right? So anyway, that should wrap it up, you guys. Thank you so much. We just babbled there at the end. That was fun. All right, so thanks, y'all. Appreciate you being here. Please make sure you like the stream, that you leave me a comment after it's over, and share it if you want to, or you can. Thank you to everybody who sent me super chats and donos and supported me tonight. I really appreciate it. If you're watching this later, you can support me at any time by seeing the links in the video description or in the channel description. And shout out to everybody, all my friends, all my homies. Tamara, thank you so much for coming by. I really appreciate it, and good to see you. And all of my mods, I love you. And to everybody out there, hope you have a really good night and you have a good day tomorrow. And thanks again for coming by. Peace, y'all. Peace.